What's going on, guys? My name is Sam and you're watching Cast Blast Camp. And today I'm going to be showing you how to quarter a deer. Here recently I just got a harvest. It was a spike buck, average size body, but it's going to be good meat for the freezer. So in this video I'm going to show you how to quarter a deer just one way, not the way. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. So I am using a hoist and gambrel method to hang the deer from while we quarter it. This keeps the deer off the ground, keeps your meat clean, and makes easy work of quartering this deer. Now the first step that I'm going to do is I'm going to remove these lower leg portions. If you haven't already removed them, this is the time to do it. Now you can do this with just a knife if that's all you have. But since I'm at home and I have availability to my other tools, I'm going to use a Sawzall to get this off really quickly. Also in the bottom of this cooler is a bunch of ice, and then I have this clean contractor's bag in here. That's what I'm going to be putting the meat into to keep it cold. The next step, we are going to remove the front shoulder. The good thing about this part is there's no bone or joint that actually connects this shoulder to the deer's body. It's all connective tissue. The shoulder blade runs in a circular fashion up through here. You'll just take your blade, cut in through the armpit area, around the shoulder blade, and down the neck. We start on the inside, the armpit area, making our first cuts. You'll just try to cut along the natural seam where the muscles meet together. And it is a bit cold, so it's a little bit harder to feel. This has been hanging up in the tree overnight, and it was in the high 20s to low 30s, so it's got a little firm, but you can use your fingers to feel about where the shoulder blade runs, and you want to take your knife and cut around it. You can see the back part of the shoulder blade protruding out as I bend the leg forward. That can help you identify the location. The fresher your deer, the easier this will be, because it'll be softer and a little easier to work with, but you can still do it if the deer has gotten cold. You can put your hand on the arm and twist it like that to pop the bone out to cut around it. Also working back on the inside, cutting that natural connective tissue there, that seam. Then it's pretty much disconnected, but I'm going to work this meat down the neck a bit. All right, just like that, the front shoulder is off. Let's go ahead and put it in the cooler. So that's the method on how to take off the front shoulders. Now I'm going to do the other one. It's the exact same method as I just showed you here. So now we're going to remove the neck roast portion. We did remove some of the neck meat with the shoulders, but there's still meat left on the neck. So to do that, we're going to go just a few inches, maybe about 2 inches above where you think the neck would end, and we're going to cut through. Now I'm going to cut through with my knife until I get to the spinal cord, and then I'm going to use my Sawzall to cut through the bone. You can cut through the bone with a knife if you find the joint and just go in between the joints and do a little bit of knife work. It's not that hard, but since I have access to my saw, I'm going to use it. Now I'm going to come up the back of the neck where it curves back up and starts meeting the spine on the back portion. That's where I'm going to make my cut all the way around, and that's going to be the neck roast. It's not hard, just need a good sharp blade. Okay, now you can see the neck meat is freed up from the body meat. The only thing that's connecting it is the spine. Now we're going to saw that. All right, and that is a beautiful neck roast right there. There's a good bit of meat on here. You can use this for roast meat or grind meat. Personally, I like grinding all my meat up into burger because my family likes burger the most, and it's what we use throughout the year the most. So the next cut we're gonna make is we're gonna remove the flanks. Some people call this the belly meat or the belly flaps, but I'm pretty sure the technical name is the flanks. But either way, that's gonna be the next cut. So this is a pretty simple cut. All you need is the knife still. You can get this whole deer done with nothing but a knife. We want to cut some of that connective tissue that connects this belly meat to the thigh meat back here. And then I'm going to cut up right through here, free that up, and then start that cut along the natural seam to free it up off the leg. But then you just work it down. Being careful not to cut your tenderloins. Your tenderloins are hiding in here, so you don't want to cut too deep and cut into those. You just want to cut along the natural seam all the way down until you meet the rib cage. And then just cut it right off the rib cage. Just like that. And that is beautiful flank steak right there. It's perfect for grind meat. It's not that great for grilling itself, but there's a good amount of meat in there that you can clean up later on and put through the grinder to make really, really good hamburger. On the ice it goes, and now I'm going to do the next side. And I'll meet back up with you for the next step. Okay, so for the next step, we're going to be removing the inner loins, also known as the tenderloins. This is probably the best cut of meat off the whole animal. They are located along the spinal cord on the inside of the animal. They kind of hide behind all this stuff right here, all this extra fat and whatnot. So we're going to trim some of this away and then cut these out. They're very simple to remove. You just cut around and down the spine. Some of this stuff you can pull away with just your hand. So you can use your thumb to feel where the spine is. It's pretty much going to be right in the middle. Then you're going to take your knife and cut right along each side of the spine. Then we're going to make a cut right up here, about where we made the cut for our flanks, going into the thigh at about a 45-degree angle. Now at this point, you might just be able to start using your hands to disconnect the meat. Now there might be a few tougher spots, like right here, that you'll have to cut through. But this piece will come out pretty easily. You just might have to guide it with your knife a little bit. You want to use one hand pulling the piece of meat away from the body, and the other hand using the tip of the knife to help loosen it away from the spine and the inside of the back rib area, I guess you could say. All right, and that is a beautiful tenderloin right there. You will need to clean this up later from all the fat and the extra silver skin, but that's how you remove the tenderloins. Okay, the next side is exactly the same as this side. I'm going to remove it and meet back up with you with the next step. So for our next cut, we're going to be removing the back strap. The back strap is probably the best or the second best cut of meat off of this whole animal. It's kind of like a tenderloin, except way bigger. It runs from the front of the hams all the way down to just about the shoulder area. So the first cut we're going to make is going to be right about here. This is the ham or the back leg. We're going to make a cut where the ham basically naturally meets that body section. Like with other cuts, you can use your hand and your thumb and your fingers to feel around to see where the muscles naturally meet together, as well as just kind of looking at the lines where the white meets the red. So we made a cut going up at an angle all the way down into the bone. You'll feel the bone in there with your knife. The next cut, we're going to take our blade and run all the way down the spine, getting as close to the spine as possible. Be careful, but you can use your thumb to help roll back the meat to get those extra cuts that are needed to free the meat up off the bone. So when we took off the flank, we ended up removing a little bit of this backstrap meat by accident, which is no big deal for me because all this meat is going for ground burger, so my cuts don't have to be perfect. But if you're saving this backstrap for steak, you do not want to try to cut that with your flank. You want to leave that on the strap and cut the flank separate, and you'll cut this little corner right here. But I'm going to take my knife and come right off the top of the rib cage all the way down, and you can feel your knife blade just glide right off the rib bones. You're basically cutting in at a V notch. One here, cutting down, and then one here, cutting in, and it will disconnect the whole piece of meat. Now that we got this bottom piece disconnected, I'm gonna come back up here to the top and start working it loose. Use one hand to grab and pull the meat away with firm, steady pressure, and the other hand just to use the knife lightly to help work it loose. Continue to work down the spine, freeing it up the rest of the way. Using your thumb to help roll back that meat as you make the cuts necessary to free that piece of meat off of the spine / rib area. Now you want to try to make this as clean cut as you can if you're saving this for steak, like I said, but all this is going to burger, so I'm not worried about making the prettiest of cuts. But I am still trying to get most of the meat off the bone as possible while doing this. Okay, that is the back strap right there. It'll need to be cleaned up later on, but I'm gonna go ahead and throw it on ice and get the other back strap off. It's exactly the same as this one. So now we have removed the shoulders, the neck, the flanks, the inner or tenderloins, and the back straps. So the next cuts we're gonna make is getting the rib meat off. Now some people will save the ribs. There's not a lot of meat in between the actual rib cages. It's pretty thin, but there is a little bit there. But for the sake of time, and since this is not a deboning video, I'm going to show you just how to detach the ribs from the body in a quartering style fashion. So you'll need you a good knife. A heavier knife works better here. Maybe even an axe or a hatchet could work here as well. And you'll want to make cuts along where the rib cage meets the spinal cord all the way down, and that'll free up each set of ribs. Right now I'm using a butchering knife, which is perfect for this application. And right there, that is a beautiful set of deer ribs. Now you can take the meat off the inside of this bone and off the outside of the rib cage. There's a good bit of meat that holds up on the rib cage itself, but not much in between the bones, but there is some there. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this rib cage on ice, remove the other rib cage, and then I'll show you the next cut. So now we have freed up the rib cage off the spine. Now I'm going to use my Sawzall to remove the spine from the hams. You can use a bone saw, an electric Sawzall like I have, or you can get by with just a knife. So now all that we're left with is the hindquarters, also known as the hams, or simply the back legs. We have both hung up on this gambrel system right here, but for this process I'm going to unhook one leg and leave the other one hooked on, just like that. So there's multiple ways to do this. The easiest, I would say, would probably be just to saw it down the middle with a bone saw or a Sawzall. But then you got to deal with that bone a bit later and possibly some bone shavings that might get in your meat. So another way to do it is to cut it straight off the bone. Inside of the ham here is where the spinal cord has come back and it meets up with the pelvic girdle. So we're going to make cuts that remove the ham off of the pelvic girdle, and then we're going to make more cuts that removes the pelvic girdle off of the other ham. We're going to use one hand to help pull down, and the weight of the deer is going to help make the cuts. You basically just want to follow right along the natural seam. This is the outside of the leg. There is going to be a bone that you're going to have to cut around and then go up a little bit. So you'll cut inwards as close to the bone as possible to remove as much meat as possible off of the bone. And then once you get down to right about here, you can see the bone right here. I cut a little bit into it, but now I'm going to start to cut around it. And go back in and then work it down the back portion of the spine here, using your hand to help pull down and to help separate the meat from the bone. Now we're going to turn it around and work on the inside. We're going to come back up and we're going to find the ball joint. Right there is where the leg connects to the pelvic girdle. That's the ball in the joint right there. You want to take your knife and just cut right through where it connects, just like that. And that's how you take the leg off. Now if you haven't already, this will be the time to remove the bottom portion of the leg. You will bend and find where the knee bends, and you can take your knife and just cut right through the little bend of the knee, or you can use a bone saw or a Sawzall. But since I have my Sawzall, I'm gonna go ahead and use that. All right, we removed the back ham. That is a beautiful cut of meat right there. There's many different cuts in this ham, but like I said, I'm making burger with mine. So all this will be great meat to make hamburger. Now for the next ham, we basically mirror what we did on the other one, except we're just removing the pelvic girdle from this ham as it's hanging. So I like to use the back portion right here as a hole to grab onto and help pull down so you can find where the bone meets the meat. You can use your finger to feel around. It's not too hard to find. Be careful not to cut yourself though. Go around the back part of the bone, down the back portion of the spine where it joins up with the pelvic girdle. You can almost use your hand to help as well, peel it away. Then we're going to flip it around to the inside and start making our inside cuts. Being slow and careful. This is not a speed race. And we're just going to use our blade to feel and work around the bone. And at this point, we can just about pull it off. There's a few more connections inside of here that we'll need to cut though. All right, right there is our ball and joint. We're gonna cut right above it. You can hear me tapping on it and you can see that little shiny ball. That is the connection where the ham meets the girdle. So we're gonna cut right through that. Cutting as close to the girdle bone as possible to remove as much meat. And there you go. There's your second ham. Beautiful chunk of meat right there, guys. Nice, red, rich meat. Lean too, very lean once you remove all that fat and silver skin. Now the last thing to do is remove the lower portion of the leg like we did on the other one. And it's all done, guys. You got a fully quartered deer. And now you have the finished product, a fully quartered deer. Ready to cut into different portions, to grind up, to jerky out, or do whatever you want with it. Like I said, I'm going to be taking all this off the bone and grinding it into burger. It's not that hard to quarter your own deer. And this process is very similar for a lot of different animals. Elk, caribou, even moose. They're just a lot bigger. Now you know how to quarter your own deer, and you never have to feel afraid if you can't take it to a butcher or they're not accepting deer at the time. You can do it yourself, pretty easy in your own backyard, using nothing but a knife and maybe a bone saw to make it a little bit easier. Next thing I'm going to do with all this meat is take it off the bone, put it on ice for a couple weeks, and then grind it into burger. Here recently I showed you how to make the juiciest deer burger right at home. So if you guys want to take a look at that video, I'll post it right here at the end of the screen. I also recently started getting into hide tanning. If you want to see what I learned after tanning my first hide, I'm going to post that as well. But until next time, if you guys like these hunting style videos, let me know in the comments below. Also, please consider liking, sharing with friends and family, and subscribing if you haven't already. Sam out.